The creator of Nekopara is talented, but what makes her skills so impressive is the sheer range of her works. For not only can she create multiple highly successful games of cute, breedable catgirls, but she can also produce one batshit insane horror gorefest. And it's brutal. Nie no Hakoniwa's horrific content surpasses Euphoria and even reaches into maggot-based and sadistic blood levels of grotesque ruthlessness. Uncensored blood, guts, and not at all consensual pillaging of reproductive organs. I went into this story expecting a supernatural Japanese folklore horror, but I fully underestimated what I was getting myself into. What began as a wholesome arranged marriage between two awkward lovers turned out to be a complete nightmare. One that I just couldn't look away for how deep the scheming conspiracies went and to see how mentally insane these people are. Congratulations, Eroguro fans, this one's for you. And for everyone else, here's your warning ahead. This isn't Nekopara Volume 5. Thanks to Tempasoft for providing me a review copy for me to check out and for showing me what it feels like to have your wombs internally ruptured multiple times. Note, this is going to be the censored version of this video. If you want to see the uncensored version, see the description down below. Now, let me just say, this isn't the first time I've read a story where wombs are torn up and mutilated. It's not easy watching every single time it happens, but Nie no Hakoniwa sure celebrates that, regardless of who we're watching, the crazy ones or the psychotic families. Just when you think someone might seem normal, put a strong, dashing man in their sights and their hyper-obsessed tendencies flare up like a desperate whore wanting to be breeded. Hearts lighting up in their eyes and mouths salivating like animals in heat. Our maiden in love Kyoko in particular. Pure love and unhealthy obsessions are conveyed through the same heavenly facial expressions, charming at first, impressively unsettling later on. Suffering from abuse, torture, and the consumption of human entrails is one thing, but actively carrying it out is even worse. There's no chance of redemption here. These families are all sorts of messed up, and being young is not an exception. Really, the third act of this visual novel is something special, alright, because at a certain point, you're not going in to see how our characters will escape from these crazies, but rather painfully waiting for the inevitability of when those scenes come and seeing how extreme it can get. Every hour, I'm asking myself, is there a normal person here? Only for my hopes to be dashed away. It's not as torturous as Euphoria and maggot baits, or as creative as Sadistic Blood's novel way of penetration. But what Nie no Hakoniwa has is seemingly emotionless acts of violent pillaging turning into enjoyable, pleasurable acts of violent pillaging. There's plenty of Eroguro in here, and yet I would argue that's actually positive character growth. Bold, I know, and that's the most interesting part. I won't defend their actions, but I do have to appreciate how through these cruel acts, in a very messed up way, it's their attempt to be more normal and figure out their own emotions, to have a sense of direction and inner purpose compared to how they were before. In other words, they're just a bit confused, but they got the right spirit. It's equally fascinating and repulsive. Now, while I say all of this, the third act being a roller coaster of a ruthless tragedy and an uncompromising path of subconscious revenge, I cannot stress this enough. You're gonna have to wait for it, because this story is going to demand your time investment. It's gonna make you wait for those bloody, dismembered bodies, because just like breeding, the foreplay is just that important. You might not expect this after everything I just said, but Nie no Hakoniwa actually starts off pretty wholesome. In a desperate attempt to have an heir succeed the family, House Shiki arranges a young man from outside the family, Yasuka Kuro, to marry their eldest daughter, Shiki Kyoko. The two grew up living completely different lives from each other, one raised as a proper lady, and the other raised as a disposable tool. But despite their upbringings, they were able to overcome their initial awkwardness and develop deeper feelings for one another. But on the day of their wedding, a nightmarish tragedy destroys their lives, all because of a mysterious box passed down through generations. A box that was once used by their ancestors to overthrow their oppressors and establish their family's noble status and prosperity. At this point, if you're reading a horror visual novel, you should be afraid of opening mysterious packages. You never know what you're gonna find inside, a dismembered body part or a decades-long curse. But just like every story out there, the real culprit is the bastard who sent the incoming PTSD. Seeing how it could be anyone from these house families, the visual novel, or rather, Yasuka Kuro, has a lot of ground to cover. Understanding how each of the house families functions is crucial for seeing the bigger picture. Throw in multiple time periods and the unique individuals within each family, and you have a lot to keep track of. It's like Umaneka, where everyone is scheming against each other for power and wealth, but instead of bickering siblings, it's full family lineages ready to snap. With how everyone operates to their own agenda, Nie no Hakoniwa turns from this wholesome traditional Japanese romance into this political soap opera, except the stabbing is quite literal in this case. On one hand, this level of depth provides more insight to individual characters. They all may be cut from the same extremely horny mentally demented DNA, but some tend to go on wild character arcs, self-destructive or not. On the other hand, the script tends to get lengthy, character emotions and certain phrasing gets repetitive, and there's always a tendency to focus on every character in the family. That's not even considering the loose-lipped, chaotic gremlin that pops up in the second half. This girl makes things all sorts of complicated, plot-wise and romance-wise. Out of all the characters, I do have to admit, Nozomi is one impressive, completely sane homewrecker. All of these is effective for establishing the world, but it ends up muddling the true core underneath, the lovey-dovey romance. Kuro and Kyoko's relationship is the driving force here, for their love is something special, alright? It was never normal to begin with. The romance dynamic is interesting. We have Kuro, a person who's been specifically designed as a tool for violence, a man cultivated and raised to be sold as a product to the mainland. His stoic lack of emotion yet dutiful personality is a result of his odd upbringing. And then there's Kyoko, one cheerful girl who wears her heart on her sleeve, a bit too much in fact. Kyoko be like, I can fix him, and she does a great job as the emotional anchor. Kuro's transformation is one long journey, but satisfying, to where, how can I say this, he can explicitly express his desires more physically. Really, it's a case where one half of the couple is filling in the void in the other, even if that side doesn't exactly realize that she herself is a bit broken too. In fact, Kyoko has it worse, and she can't really do anything about it, because she's a woman. The setting is important to consider. This is during a time where nobility and lineage is valued highly, and the continuation of the bloodline is of the utmost importance. Women aren't viewed equally in this society. Those who cannot give birth to a boy are viewed harshly, valued as less than for not contributing as they should. And with Kyoko being the only child of the Shiki family, the demand for an heir is pressuring. Add in social classes and the responsibility of ruling over a state, and things get a bit messy, not just family politics and blood splatters. Nie no Hakoniwa's politics and Arrow Girl are the main attractors, but its internal character focus and the message is a core element of both of those. That forceful idea that a woman has to give birth to have value is a distorted concept that becomes a subconscious trauma for our leads, to where the act of sex isn't just a form of pleasure, but also a reassurance of self-valuation, a constant need to convince themselves that they won't be abandoned, like other people were in the past. That desperate drive is pitiful to see, but seeing those women be reassured and treasured by someone who actually loves them, even if they don't show it, is heartwarming. All of those house families might be terrible, mentally deranged, and quite frankly, horrifying, but family itself is meaningful. Seeing that motivation to be by that person's side is admirable. They might not be biologically related, they might have a horrible, traumatic past, they even might be a bit odd, but if it's for them, they will do anything. Maybe even go on a bloodthirsty rampage in the third act. Just a thought. 4 out of 5. Now, if you enjoyed that review, consider subscribing to my Patreon if you want to further support the channel. Thanks to everyone for supporting me thus far and into the future. Now, if you want more recommendation about horror visual novels about women getting their wombs torn out, check out this video over here, or this one for a general horror recommendation. And just remember, don't open mysterious boxes. You never know what you're gonna get.